Cold titanium walls reverberated with gasps of Sheliak engineers, their beaks agape, mandibles twitching with the horror of Altair's discovery on planet ST-1187. An entire core sector of their flagship's brain buzzed with processing the staggering truth. The ruins of a human craft were scattered on the surface, constructed with technology so advanced the mere scan of it threatened to short the main computer. "Attention travelers of craft UESS Artemis, you have encroached on restricted Sheliak space. Withdraw immediately," Altair's voice boomed over the comms channel as his ship trained weapons on the human vessel. Captain Scott Thompson leaned into the mic of his command chair, a crooked smile spreading across his weather-beaten face. "This is Captain Thompson. We are investigating a signal of unknown origin and do not recognize your claim. Stand down, or you will be fired upon." The Sheliak ship didn't budge from orbit, weapons still charged. Bright monitor lights from the bridge control panels reflected in Thompson's hardened eyes as he strategized the next play. Humanity was counting on this mission. On him. The mysterious signal was their only lead on the UESS Prometheus. After 100 years vanished. He wouldn't let some crusty space lobsters obstruct the truth, even if it meant battle against a superior force. Thompson gripped his armrests, a determined scowl creasing his brow. There were only two ways this standoff ended, with answers or in a body bag. He turned to his elite crew, all staring at their leader, waiting on his order. "Prep the Artemis for combat. If they want a fight, we'll give them one they won't forget. Humanity's future is on the line." Captain Scott Thompson slammed his armrest controls, overriding the ship's safety systems. "Helm, take us down. We're landing on that rock." The crew exchanged nervous glances but complied. The Artemis trembled, its hull creaking as it pierced ST-1187's atmosphere. Altair shouted more threats over comms, but Scott had already shut off the channel. His eyes were fixed on the readouts streaming across the main view screen. "I'm picking up something on the GPR," Ensign Chen reported from the science station. "It looks like ruins. Massive ones, buried deep." Scott leaned forward. "Put it on screen." The image zoomed in on a sprawling artificial structure, hidden beneath the planet's surface. Its scale defied belief. Scott turned to the crew. "Chen, Harris, stay with the ship. Keep an eye on our Sheliak friends. The rest of you gear up. We're going down there." Minutes later, the away team stood on the barren surface. Howling winds whipped dust across the cracked, lifeless ground. Scott, Lieutenant Reed, and Dr. O'Connor approached the entrance to the ruins, weapons drawn. Something about the desolate landscape set Scott's teeth on edge. His instincts, sharpened by countless battles, whispered warnings. He signaled Reed forward. "Take point. Stay sharp." They entered the cavernous structure, flashlights cutting through the gloom. Reed took the lead, scanning for threats. Scott and O'Connor followed close behind. Then they saw it, the shattered remains of a colossal human ship, half buried in the rubble. Even in ruins it dwarfed their puny shuttle. Scott's breath caught in his throat. "My God," O'Connor whispered, "it's the Prometheus!" They picked their way through the debris, marveling at the vessel's impossible scale and alien design. It was beyond anything they'd seen, beyond anything humanity should have been capable of a century ago. In what had once been a vast hangar bay, they found a functional computer terminal. O'Connor interfaced his suit's systems and pored over the corrupted data. His face went slack with shock. "Captain, this isn't just a ship, it's a weapon. A Dreadnought built for total war." His voice shook. "If the Sheliak recover this technology—" Scott's blood ran cold. The ruins suddenly felt more like a tomb. He knew what they had to do. "Then we need to make sure they don't." The weight of that grim duty settled onto the away team's shoulders. But one thing was clear. The Prometheus could never fall into enemy hands, no matter the cost. As the away team pushed further into the bowels of the ancient vessel, Captain Thompson and Lieutenant Reed split off to search for the Prometheus's power systems. They picked their way through the debris-strewn corridors, following the faint hum of dormant machinery. "There!" Scott pointed to a partially collapsed doorway. "That should be the engineering section." They pried open the jammed door, revealing a cavernous chamber filled with towering reactors and pulsing conduits. Scott located the main control panel, its screens dark and lifeless. "Let's see if we can get this old girl up and running." He pried open the panel and set to work rewiring the circuits. In another section of the ship, Dr. O'Connor hunched over a flickering terminal, his fingers flying across the keys as he sifted through the Prometheus's fragmented data logs. His eyes widened as he stumbled upon a heavily encrypted file. "Odin," he breathed, cracking the file's security protocols. "An AI designed to control the ship's weapons and defenses. This is incredible." On the Artemis, Ensign Chen's console lit up with warning lights. "Sir, I'm detecting a massive energy surge from the Sheliak vessel. They're powering up their landing craft." Corporal Harris's hands danced over the comms station. "I'll try to jam their signals, buy us some time." But after a few tense moments, he shook his head. "It's no use. Their tech is too advanced. I can't block them." Back in the Prometheus's ruins, Captain Thompson let out a triumphant shout as the engineering console hummed to life. But his elation was short-lived as Dr. O'Connor's voice crackled over the comm. "Captain, I've found something. The Prometheus, it was more than just a ship, it was a weapon, designed to fight a war against a species called the Chintal, and at its heart was an AI called Odin." Scott's brow furrowed. "An AI controlling a Dreadnought?" "There's more. The Chintal, they were technologically superior to anything humanity had faced. The Prometheus was our last hope." A cold weight settled in Scott's gut. He knew what he had to do. "I'm going to interface with Odin directly. We need to know what happened here." "Captain, are you sure?" Reed's voice was laced with concern. "Directly linking with an unknown AI. We're out of time and options." Scott's tone brooked no argument. "Dr. O'Connor said the Prometheus was our last hope. We need to know why." He located the AI core, a towering column of pulsing light and circuitry. With a steadying breath, he connected his neural implant to the interface port. Instantly, his mind was flooded with a rush of data and sensations. He saw through Odin's eyes as the Prometheus faced down a fleet of Chintal warships, their hulls bristling with strange angular weapons. He felt the thrum of the Dreadnought's engines as it surged into battle, its experimental cannon charging with a blinding light. The Chintal ships shattered like glass under the onslaught, their shields useless against the Prometheus's secret weapon. Scott watched in awe as the mighty vessel tore through the enemy fleet, an unstoppable force of human ingenuity and determination. But then the vision shifted, and he saw the cost of that victory. The Prometheus, battered and broken, limping away from the battlefield, the crew haggard and haunted, their eyes speaking of unspeakable horrors witnessed, and a looming sense of dread, a realization that this was not the end, but a desperate gamble in the face of an even greater threat. Scott's eyes snapped open as the interface ended. He stumbled back from the AI core, his mind reeling with the implications of what he had seen. The Prometheus had been more than a ship. It had been humanity's trump card, a weapon to fight a war they couldn't win. A war that might not be over. He turned to Reed and O'Connor, his face grim. The Prometheus wasn't just a military operation. It was a last-ditch effort to save humanity from an existential threat. And if the Sheliak get their claws on this technology... A distant boom echoed through the ruins, followed by the unmistakable sound of energy weapons fire. The Sheliak had breached the perimeter. Scott drew his sidearm, his jaw set with determination. "We need to hold them off long enough to uncover the Prometheus's secrets. This ship might be the key to our survival." The away team took up defensive positions, weapons trained on the entrances. They had come too far to fail now. The future of humanity rested on the secrets locked within the Prometheus' ruined hull. The sharp crack of pulse rifle fire echoed through the Prometheus' ruined corridors as Captain Scott Thompson unleashed a barrage of suppressive fire at the advancing Sheliak warriors. Their chitinous armor deflected most of the shots, but the onslaught bought precious seconds for Lieutenant Reed and Dr. O'Connor to retreat deeper into the ship. "Go, I'll hold them off," Scott shouted over the din of battle. ducking behind a twisted bulkhead as a volley of plasma bolts sizzled past his head. Reed hesitated for a split second, torn between his duty to follow orders and his instinct to stand and fight alongside his captain. But a stern nod from Scott steeled his resolve. He grabbed O'Connor by the arm and pulled him towards the ship's inner sanctum. Scott's intimate knowledge of the Prometheus layout, gleaned from his mind meld with Odin, transformed the ruined vessel into a deadly labyrinth. He wove through the debris-strewn passageways, always staying one step ahead of Commander Altair and his soldiers. A Sheliak warrior rounded a corner, his plasma rifle leveled at Scott's chest. But the captain was faster. He dropped to one knee, firing a burst from his pulse rifle that caught the alien square in the faceplate. The warrior crumpled, his rifle clattering to the deck. Scott pressed on, his senses heightened by adrenaline and the weight of his mission. Every Sheliak he took down bought Reed and O'Connor precious time to reach the Prometheus's secret weapon. Deep within the ship, Reed and O'Connor navigated the twisting corridors, guided by the ghostly whispers of Odin's voice in their comms. The AI's instructions led them to a heavily reinforced bulkhead, guarded by a squad of Sheliak soldiers. Reed's mind raced, calculating angles and trajectories as he assessed the situation. His eyes fell on a damaged power conduit, sparks sputtering from its severed end. "Dark, cover me," he whispered, unclipping a pair of concussion grenades from his belt. With a deft motion, Reed tossed the grenades towards the conduit. The explosives detonated in a blinding flash, the electromagnetic pulse shorting out the Sheliak's energy shields. Reed capitalized on the momentary confusion, firing precise shots that dropped the disoriented guards in quick succession. "Go now," he barked, ushering O'Connor through the breached bulkhead. On the Artemis, warning klaxons blared as Ensign Chen's fingers flew across her console, rerouting power from the ship's damaged systems to the weapons array. Beside her, Corporal Harris worked to calibrate the targeting sensors, his brow furrowed in concentration. "I've got weapons back online, but we're only at half capacity," Chen reported, her voice tight with tension. Harris opened his mouth to reply, but his words were cut short by a proximity alert. A second Sheliak ship had emerged from hyperspace, its angular hull bristling with weaponry as it bore down on the Artemis. Chen's mind whirred, desperately seeking a solution to their impossible odds. Suddenly her eyes widened with a spark of inspiration. "The jump drive," she breathed. "If we can create a localized distortion in spacetime, it might disrupt the Sheliak ship's systems long enough for us to gain the upper hand." Harris's face paled at the prospect. The experimental jump drive was untested, its effects unpredictable. But as he watched the Sheliak ships close in, he realized they had no choice. "Do it," he said, his voice grim. "It's our only chance." As Chen hurried to initiate the jump sequence, Scott, Reed, and O'Connor fought on, their fates intertwined with the secrets of the Prometheus. The battle for humanity's survival had reached its tipping point, and the crew of the Artemis stood on the razor's edge between victory and oblivion. As Altair's words echoed through the ruined corridors of the Prometheus, Scott lowered his pulse rifle slightly, a flicker of understanding crossing his face. The Sheliak commander's mandibles twitched, his voice laced with a desperation that Scott recognized all too well. The desperation of a soldier fighting for his species' survival. "The Chintal nearly destroyed us," Altair said, his eyes fixed on Scott. "We lost countless lives, entire worlds reduced to ashes. The energy cannon, it could ensure our people never face such devastation again." Scott shook his head, his grip tightening on his weapon. "That kind of power, it's too much for any one species to control. It would only lead to more war, more destruction." Altair's posture stiffened, his clawed hand hovering over his plasma rifle. "I cannot take that risk. My duty is to my people, to their future." In that moment, Scott knew there would be no truce. He glanced at Reed, a silent understanding passing between them. They had to end this here and now. The standoff erupted into a fierce firefight, pulse rounds and plasma bolts scorching the air. Scott and Reed moved in perfect unison, their years of training and combat experience guiding their actions. They weaved through the debris, using the Prometheus' twisted remains as cover. One by one, the Sheliak soldiers fell, their armor no match for the humans' precision and tenacity. But victory came at a terrible price. A plasma bolt caught Reed in the chest, sending him crashing to the ground. Scott rushed to his side, his heart pounding as he saw the severity of the wound. "Go," Reed gasped, his face contorted in pain. "Help O'Connor. I'll buy you the time you need." Scott hesitated, torn between his duty and his loyalty to his friend. But Reed's eyes blazed with resolve, a silent plea for Scott to finish what they'd started. With a heavy heart, Scott nodded, clasping Reed's hand one last time before sprinting deeper into the ship. In the Prometheus core, O'Connor worked feverishly at the energy cannon's controls, his fingers flying across the holographic interface. Sweat beaded his brow as he rerouted power from the ship's damaged systems, the cannon's components humming to life. On the Artemis, Chen and Harris watched in awe as the localized space-time distortion engulfed the Sheliak ships, their shields flickering and failing under the onslaught of twisted gravity. But their elation turned to horror as the distortion continued to grow, tendrils of warped space-time lashing out like hungry predators. "It's unstable," Chen cried, her fingers racing across her console. The distortion, it's spreading too fast. Harris stared at the viewscreen, his face pale as he watched the very fabric of reality unraveling before their eyes. God help us all. In the heart of the Prometheus, O'Connor let out a triumphant shout as the energy cannon thrummed with power, its muzzle glowing with an otherworldly light. Scott burst into the room, his eyes widening as he took in the sight of the ancient weapon awakening once more. "Doc, we've got a problem," Scott said, his voice strained. "The space-time distortion, it's out of control. We need to stop it now." O'Connor nodded grimly, his hands flying over the controls. "The cannon, I think I can use it to create a counter-distortion, stabilize the anomaly. But the energy release—" Scott met O'Connor's gaze, understanding the unspoken truth. The cannon's activation would be catastrophic, a destructive force that would annihilate everything in its path, including the Prometheus and any remaining Sheliak forces. "Do it," Scott said, his voice heavy with the weight of his decision. "We'll make a run for it, get back to the Artemis, but we can't let that distortion consume everything." O'Connor nodded, his fingers inputting the final commands. The energy cannon pulsed, its light growing brighter and brighter until it was almost blinding. Scott grabbed O'Connor by the arm, hauling him away from the controls. They raced through the Prometheus corridors, the ship shuddering and groaning around them as the energy buildup reached critical levels. Debris rained down from the ceiling, the ancient vessel tearing itself apart under the strain of its own power. Scott and O'Connor burst from the ruins just as the energy cannon discharged, a lance of pure searing light that pierced the very heavens. The ground heaved beneath their feet, the shockwave hurling them forward as the Prometheus, the Sheliak forces, and the surrounding landscape were consumed in a maelstrom of destruction. Battered and bruised, Scott and O'Connor staggered to their feet, their eyes wide with disbelief as they witnessed the cataclysmic event unfolding before them. The space-time distortion shimmered and writhed, the cannon's counter-distortion battling against the anomaly's ravenous hunger. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. Then, with a final, shuddering pulse, the distortion collapsed in on itself, the cannon's energy spent. The Prometheus, once a symbol of humanity's ingenuity and determination, was reduced to a smoldering crater, its secrets buried beneath the rubble. Scott and O'Connor stumbled back to the Artemis, their hearts heavy with the weight of their losses and the knowledge of what they had unleashed. As they stepped onto the bridge, the crew fell silent, the gravity of their mission's outcome etched onto every face. Chen's voice was barely a whisper as she broke the stillness. "The distortion, it's gone. The cannon, it worked." Scott sank into his command chair, his eyes distant as he grappled with the implications of their discovery. The Prometheus, the energy cannon, the ancient conflict that had driven its creation, it had all come at a terrible cost. Reed, Altair, the Sheliak soldiers, their lives had been the price of this knowledge, this power, and now the balance of the galaxy had been forever altered, the secret of humanity's dreadnought unleashed upon an unsuspecting universe. As the Artemis set course for Earth, Scott couldn't shake the feeling that their mission was far from over. The repercussions of their actions would be felt for generations to come, and the crew of the Artemis would forever bear the burden of their choices. In the silence of his quarters, Scott stared out at the stars, a single question echoing in his mind. Had the knowledge and power they'd gained been worth the lives lost? The answer, he knew, would haunt him for the rest of his days. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.